On October 3, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald returned to Dallas. Lee's grand plans of running his branch of Fair Play for Cuba in New Orleans never materialized. The Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New York rejected his request to start a local chapter. His radio interview revealed a troubled and confused individual rather than an inspiring activist. His trip to Mexico City was a disaster. The Cubans and the Soviets would not issue him a visa while he was in Mexico City. He was told it would take months to process. Lee's grandiose idea of escaping to Cuba and reuniting with Marina in the Soviet Union had come to nothing. Lee was unemployed, broke, and his pregnant wife refused to live with him, as their second child came into the world. The forces building inside Lee Oswald are about to collide with the hands of fate in a rapid sequence of events. The circumstances would not reveal themselves until the evening of November 21, 1963. Marina's rejection of Lee on that fateful Thursday evening will be the final catalyst that sends Lee Harvey Oswald into action. The generosity of Ruth Paine toward Marina secured her with a home, food, and a helping hand rather than a backhand. Ruth arranged for Marina to deliver the baby at Parkland Hospital. Yet Ruth Paine unwittingly transported Oswald's rifle to and from New Orleans. Ruth was a peace-loving, non-violent Quaker. She didn't realize the depth of Lee Oswald's psychopathology. Marina covered up Lee's treachery and violent tendencies because, in her words, he was my husband. Ruth's role in facilitating Lee Oswald toward the assassination is ironic. A person who only wants to help others is caught up in a psychodrama that ends with the president's death. But Ruth is not alone. Many others will help Lee Oswald as he moves toward his date with destiny. October 4, 1963, Lee applies for work at Paget Printing Company. He is not hired because of poor references. Later, he telephones Marina and asks for a ride to Ruth Paine's home. Marina tells him no. He hitchhikes the 12 miles to Ruth's house. October 7, 1963, Ruth drives Lee to the bus station, and he returns to Dallas to look for work. Later, he obtains a room at 621 Marsalis Street. The landlady hears him speaking Russian and tells him he has to leave. After getting evicted, he went to the North Beckley rooming house and was told there was a vacancy. Oswald's rent was $8 a week. Ruth Paine mentions to her neighbors that Lee is having trouble finding work. One of the ladies, Linnie Mae Randall, said there was a possible opening at the Texas School Book Depository, and when Lee calls the Paine home that evening, Ruth informs him of the job opening. October 15, 1963, Lee applies at the School Book Depository, and is hired. He starts to work the next day. October 18, 1963, Oswald receives a ride from Buell Frazier to the Paine home, where a surprise birthday party awaits Lee. Lee is 24. October 20, 1963, Marina gives birth to Audrey Marina Rachel Oswald at Parkland Hospital. October 23, 1963, Lee attends a right-wing rally where General Walker is a speaker. October 25, 1963, Michael Paine and Lee attend a meeting of the ACLU. Lee will join the ACLU. The FBI wants to talk to Lee. The CIA sent a cable to the FBI asking them to check out Lee Oswald since he contacted the Cuban and Soviet embassies in Mexico City. Lee's FBI file was reopened and transferred to the New Orleans office from Dallas. An agent checks out Lee's address in New Orleans and is told he skipped out on the rent, and there is no forwarding address. Lee's file is sent back to the Dallas office. The only contact the Dallas office has for him is Ruth Paine. November 1, 1963, Special FBI Agent James Hosty interviews Ruth and Marina at the Payne home. Also, that day, Lee rents a new P.O. box and sends letters to the ACLU and the American Communist Party. November 2, Lee instructs Marina that if Hosty returns, she should get his plate number. November 5, Hosty returns for another interview, and Marina writes down his license plate number. Marina claims she doesn't know where Lee is living. November 12, Lee goes to the Dallas FBI office in downtown Dallas and asks to speak with Special Agent Hosty. The receptionist, Nanny Lee Fenner, told Oswald that Hosty was unavailable. Lee holds an unsealed envelope with a note inside. He throws the envelope on the desk, says, "Give this to him," and walks to the elevators. The bottom part of the letter is out of the envelope, and Nan reads, "I will blow up the Dallas Police Department and the FBI office." Nan took the note to the agent in charge, Kyle Clark, who told her to forget it. "He's a nut, forget it." When Nan Fenner returned to her desk, Oswald was still waiting for an elevator. Nan would testify that Lee glared at her with the look of a wild animal. The rage burning in his eyes she would never forget. The letter would be put in Agent Hosty's inbox, where it sat until after the assassination. The missed opportunity by the FBI to detain Oswald for threatening a law enforcement agency was covered up for over a decade. The FBI also failed to put Lee Oswald on the potential watch list sent to the Secret Service before the president's visit because they didn't know where Lee lived. November 17, Ruth calls Lee's rooming house at Marina's request to find they don't know him by the name Lee Harvey Oswald. He lives there under an alias because he doesn't want the FBI to know where he lives. November 19, the Dallas Times-Herald details the exact route of the presidential motorcade. The stage is now set for the final violent act, which will brand Dallas for decades. The presidential limo has a plexiglass top that is not bulletproof. The car itself is not bulletproof. Only the underside of the limo is hardened against explosives. But the plexiglass top will not be used in Dallas. It was important for President Kennedy and Jackie to be seen by the crowd, as JFK would soon be running for another term, and this visit was about raising money for his re-election. The Kennedys had great popularity, but the right-wingers in Texas, oil patch millionaires, and the like did not love the president. In fact, on Friday, November 22, large ads would run in both Dallas papers calling out the president. These ads would be held against the people of Dallas for decades. There would be an avalanche of hate mail received by the Dallas Police Department and the mayor for many years. On Thursday, November 21, 1963, Lee Oswald asks Wesley Fraser for a ride back to Irving. Ruth Payne arrives at her house after grocery shopping to find Lee, Marina, and June in the front yard. Lee is playing with June. In the past, Lee always called and asked permission to come to the house. On this Thursday, Lee just showed up. Marina took Ruth aside and asked if this was all right. Ruth said it was okay. Ruth prepares dinner as the Oswalds are in Marina's bedroom. Ruth serves dinner for everyone. She then reads her children their nightly stories and puts them to bed. Ruth Payne goes to the garage to work and notices the light is on. She always turns the light off and realizes someone was in the garage. It will be a haunting detail of what's about to happen. Ruth Payne works in the garage and goes to bed around 11 p.m. The next morning, Friday, November 22, 1963, Lee Oswald left the Paynes house before anyone was awake. There was a half-empty cup of instant coffee left in the sink. Lee leaves his wedding ring and $175 in cash on the dresser. Marina had refused Lee's request to reunite with him 3 times the day before. Lee's world had dissolved into nothing. Now it was time to act. 7:15 a.m., Linnie Mae Randall sees Lee carrying a long paper bag. 7:23 a.m., Wesley Fraser said Oswald had a long package under his arm, telling him it was curtain rods for his room in Dallas. Lee and Fraser leave for the school book depository with the package. Lee's room in Dallas already had curtains. 7:50 a.m., Lee enters with the package at the book depository loading dock entrance. 11:45 a.m., Lee remains on the 6th floor while the others descend by elevator to the 2nd floor for lunch. Oswald was not seen again until after the shooting. Another co-worker, Bonnie Ray Williams, was eating lunch on the depository's 6th floor until at least 12:10 p.m. He said he did not see Oswald or anyone else on the 6th floor then and thought he was the only person up there. He also said some boxes in the southeast corner may have prevented him from seeing deep into the sniper's nest. Various workers, including Givens, Junior Jarman, Troy West, Danny Arche, Jack Doherty, Joe Molina, Mrs. Robert Reed, and Bill Lovelady, who were either in the 1st or 2nd floor lunchrooms at times between 12 o'clock and 12:30 p.m. reported that Oswald was not present in those rooms during their lunch breaks. Bonnie Ray Williams, Harold Norman, and Junior Jarman decided to go to the south side of the 5th floor to watch the motorcade at 12:20 p.m. At 12:30, the men saw the president raise his right hand, and at that moment, they heard a sound like a shot. The next shot had people in Dealey Plaza dropping to the ground, and the third shot had the president leaning to the right. The sound shook dust loose from the ceiling, and Williams had dust in his hair. From his location on the 5th floor, Harold Norman heard the most. The bare floor acts as a sounding board. He hears the bolt action of a rifle clicking 3 times and the thump, thump, thump of 3 cartridges dropping to the floor. Harold tells the others, "Man, someone is shooting at the president, and it's coming from right over us." The assassin was directly over their heads. They looked out the window and saw people running to the opposite side of the building. The acoustic effects of Dealey Plaza made people think shots had come from someplace else. But these 3 men knew exactly where the shots were fired. Lee's sniper nest was book cartons, stacked up to conceal him, and more cartons used as a gun rest in front of the window. Lee stashes his rifle, scope up, between book cartons and heads for the rear of the 6th floor and the stairway. Witness Howard Brennan was sitting across the street from the Texas School Book Depository, and watching the motorcade go by. He notified police that he heard a shot come from above and looked up to see a man with a rifle fire another shot from the southeast corner window on the 6th floor. Brennan described the shooter, and Dallas police subsequently broadcast descriptions at 12:45 p.m., 12:48 p.m., and 12:55 p.m. He said he had seen the same man looking through the window minutes earlier. Brennan recalled after the second shot was fired, "This man I saw previously was aiming for his last shot, and maybe paused for another second as though to assure himself that he had hit his mark." About 90 seconds after the shots sounded, Lee was encountered in the 2nd floor lunchroom by Dallas motorcycle officer Marion L. Baker, who had been in the motorcade a few cars behind the president. Upon hearing the shots from the school book depository, Officer Baker left the motorcade and headed straight for the book depository. With his gun drawn, he entered the book depository and came across Supervisor Truly, who began identifying employees. Baker let Oswald pass after Truly identified him as an employee. Baker later said Oswald did not seem nervous or out of breath. Truly said that Oswald looked startled when Baker pointed his gun at him. Mrs. Robert Reed, a clerical supervisor at the depository who returned to her office within 2 minutes of the shooting, said she saw Oswald, very calm, on the second floor holding a Coca-Cola bottle. As they walked past each other, Mrs. Reed said to Oswald, "The president has been shot," to which he mumbled something in response, but Reed did not understand him. Oswald was believed to have left the depository through the front entrance just before police sealed it off. Truly later pointed out to officers that Oswald was the only employee he was sure was missing. At about 12:40 p.m., 10 minutes after the shooting, Oswald boarded a city bus. Probably due to heavy traffic, he requested a transfer from the driver and got off 2 blocks later. Oswald then took a taxicab to his rooming house at 1026 North Beckley Avenue and entered through the front door at about 1 p.m. According to his housekeeper Eileen Roberts, Oswald immediately went to his room, walking pretty fast. Roberts said that Oswald left a few minutes later, zipping up a grey jacket he was not wearing when he entered earlier. As Oswald left, Roberts looked out of the window of her house and last saw him standing at the northbound Beckley Avenue bus stop in front of her home. At approximately 1:15 p.m., Dallas patrolman J.D. Tippet drove up in his patrol car alongside Oswald, presumably because Oswald resembled the broadcast description of the man seen by witness Howard Brennan firing shots at Kennedy's motorcade. He encountered Oswald near the corner of East 10th Street and North Patton Avenue. This location is about 9/10 of a mile, 1.4 kilometers, southeast of Oswald's rooming house, a distance that Oswald could have easily walked. Tippet pulled alongside Oswald and apparently exchanged words with him. Shortly after 1:15 p.m., Tippet exited his car, and Oswald immediately fired his pistol, hitting Officer Tippet in the head, chest, and stomach areas, killing the policeman with 4 shots. Numerous witnesses heard the shots and saw Oswald flee the scene holding a revolver. 9 positively identified him as the man who shot Tippet and fled. 4 cartridge cases found at the scene were identified by expert witnesses before the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee as having been fired from the revolver later found in Oswald's possession, excluding all other weapons. The bullets taken from Tippet's body could not be positively identified as having been fired from Oswald's revolver, as the bullets were too extensively damaged to make conclusive assessments. Shoe store manager Johnny Brewer testified that he saw Oswald ducking into the entrance alcove of his store. Suspicious of this activity, Brewer watched Oswald continue up the street and slip without paying into the nearby Texas Theater, where the film War is Hell was playing. He alerted the theater's ticket clerk, who telephoned the police at about 1:40 p.m. As police arrived, the house lights were brought up, and Brewer pointed out Oswald sitting near the theater's rear. Police officer Nick MacDonald testified that he was the first to reach Oswald and that Oswald seemed ready to surrender, saying, "Well, it is all over now." MacDonald said that Oswald pulled out a pistol tucked into the front of his pants, then pointed the gun at him and pulled the trigger. MacDonald stated that the pistol did not fire because the pistol's hammer came down on the webbing between the thumb and index finger of his hand as he grabbed for the gun. MacDonald also said that Oswald struck him, but that he struck back, and Oswald was disarmed. At this moment, he screamed at the officers, "I'm going to kill all you bastards." As he was led from the theater, Oswald shouted he was a victim of police brutality. Lee Harvey Oswald will be in multiple lineups. The witnesses who saw him shoot Officer Tippet will all identify him as the person who fled the scene with a pistol. Oswald was formally arraigned for the murder of Officer Tippet at 7:10 p.m. Soon after his arrest, Oswald encountered reporters in a hallway. Oswald declared, "I didn't shoot anybody, and they've taken me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy." Later, at an arranged press meeting, a reporter asked, "Did you kill the president?" And Oswald, who by that time had been advised of the charge of murdering Tippet but had not yet been arraigned in Kennedy's death, answered, "No, I have not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question." As he was led from the room, the question was called out, "What did you do in Russia? And, how did you hurt your eye?" Oswald answered, "A policeman hit me." By early the next morning, shortly after 1:30 a.m., he had been arraigned for the assassination of President Kennedy. Oswald was interrogated several times during his 2 days at Dallas Police Headquarters. He admitted that he went to his rooming house after leaving the book depository. He also admitted that he changed his clothes and armed himself with a .38 caliber revolver before leaving his house to go to the theater. Oswald denied killing Kennedy and Tippet, denied owning a rifle, and said 2 photographs of him holding a rifle and a pistol were fakes. He denied telling his co-worker he wanted a ride to Irving to get curtain rods for his apartment. He said the package contained his lunch. He also denied carrying an extended, bulky package to work the morning of the assassination. Oswald denied knowing an A.J. Heidel. Oswald was then shown a forged Selective Service System card bearing his photograph and the alias Alec James Heidel, which he had in his possession at the time of his arrest. Oswald refused to answer any questions concerning the card, saying, "You have the card yourself, and you know as much about it as I do." FBI Special Agent James Hosty and Dallas Police Captain Will Fritz, Chief of Homicide, conducted the first interrogation of Oswald on Friday, November 22nd. When Oswald was asked to account for himself during the assassination, he replied that he was eating his lunch in the first-floor lounge, known as the Domino Room. He said he then went to the second-floor lunchroom to buy a Coca-Cola from the soda machine. He was drinking it when he encountered Dallas motorcycle policeman Marion Baker, who had entered the building with his gun drawn. Oswald said that while he was in the Domino Room, he saw 2 Negro employees walking by, one he recognized as Junior and a shorter man whose name he could not recall. Junior Jarman and Harold Norman confirmed to the Warren Commission that they had walked through the Domino Room around noon during their lunch break. Jarman testified that Oswald was not in the Domino Room when he was there. When asked if anyone else was in the Domino Room, Norman testified that somebody else was there, but he could not remember who it was. Lee Harvey Oswald is in police custody less than 90 minutes after the assassination. The interrogation continues into the night as more and more evidence arrives about Lee Harvey Oswald. At Dallas City Hall, Marina was brought in along with Ruth Payne to translate. They showed Marina the rifle found on the 6th floor, which she identified as belonging to her husband, Lee. Marina will be allowed to talk to Lee. She picks up a phone and looks at him through a plexiglass window. Lee tells her that everything will be fine. Marina never asks Lee anything about the shootings. It will be the last time she sees Lee alive. Marina recounts in the book Marina and Lee, written shortly after the assassination, that she could tell Lee was saying goodbye to her with his eyes. Lee had become infamous for killing a president. He knew that killing the president had achieved him a place in the history books. He also knew that Marina would be cared for because of his fame. In trying to shoot General Walker, Lee realized he needed a real power target, not a wannabe. The irony of how the circumstances unfolded should not be a subject of conspiracy or speculation but following the evidence and facts that clearly reveal the assassin. Sunday, November 24th, the Dallas Police Department performs its final security sweep of the basement. There were many incoming death threats about Oswald. The police had decided to use an armored car as a decoy and make the actual transport in an unmarked car. The armored car was too large to fit through the car door opening to the basement. It was backed down the ramp as far as it would go and stopped. The security details reported that the building was secure. Unknown to them, Jack Ruby and his 2 dogs had driven to the Western Union office just a block away from City Hall to wire money to one of the strippers who worked at Jack's club in Dallas. Jack saw all of the activity and decided to see what was happening. Jack had already been to one of the previous press conferences. Jack slipped into one of his back entrances and watched as the police escorted Oswald to be transported. Jack Ruby was always armed and, at that moment, stepped out of the crowd and shot Lee in the abdomen at point-blank range. Captain Lavelle, handcuffed to Lee, says, "Jack, you son of a bitch." All of the best-laid plans of the Dallas Police Department go up in a puff of gun smoke. Oswald is taken to Parkland Hospital, where JFK died 2 days earlier. Oswald's wounds are grave. He arrives with dilating pupils and gasping for breath, bleeding out from the gunshot wound. He is given twice his blood volume, but his heart stops, and he is declared dead. On November 25, 1963, the nation's gaze was transfixed by the horse-drawn caisson and final burial of President John Kennedy. But in the shadow of this grim but stirring procession, on that same Monday, Lee Harvey Oswald was quietly buried in Fort Worth, Texas. Oswald's wife Marina, 2 daughters, brother Robert, and mother Marguerite were the only mourners. The public was prohibited from Rose Hill Cemetery, and no friends or other relatives showed up. As Secret Service, FBI agents, and a heavy police guard watched, 7 newsmen serving as volunteer pallbearers carried Oswald's coffin to the grave. After a quick, makeshift service, Marguerite barely missed a beat before stepping up to a television camera. "Lee Harvey Oswald, my son, even after his death, has done more for his country than any other living human being." It was a statement she memorialized by etching it in copper. It was one of many strange, discordant reactions that led many to question her sanity in the days and years ahead, and to find the likely source of many of her son's problems. The life of Lee Harvey Oswald ended in Dallas. His history of mental illness dates from an early age. Marina noted that he seemed at peace with himself when she visited him in jail. He had finally succeeded at something and now had the world's attention. One can imagine the thoughts running through Oswald's head about how he would address the jury and subsequent interviews with the media. What he failed to realize were the forces he had unleashed. How another mentally unstable individual was coming apart. A person who would snap and end Oswald's life.